modern technology. Anyway, this policy of unilateralism on the part of George W. Bush kind of struck a lot of people in the rest of the world the wrong way. Kind of saw the United States as almost bullying, and it wasn't a particularly good foreign policy. It depends on it. If you think unilateralism is a great idea, then hey, it's wonderful. Domestically speaking, President Bush is, he inherits a $200 billion surplus from the Clinton administration. The Clinton administration did, in fact, raise taxes, which is not entirely a conservative idea, and ultimately did have a surplus. But when President Bush took office, he did inherit a recession that was the result of the breaking of the tech bubble, largely. So we were in the middle of an economic recession, and what are we going to do? Well, we're going to cut taxes, which of course is a stimulating, policy. But we're also going to take that surplus, and he ran on the idea that, hey, we have a surplus of the Americans' money, let's give that back to the American people. So he basically wrote us all checks. Nice. And we got that money back, but of course that was the end of that surplus. It turns out we kind of could have used that surplus when it came to, declaring war against terrorism. But he gave us that money back. Was it stimulative? It was a little bit stimulative, but the problem is that the United States had racked up a tremendous amount of private debt that was held by individuals. So a lot of that money that came back to us ended up getting sucked up in attempts to pay off our credit. So, which I want to talk about in just a moment. Of course, probably the biggest, most devastating thing to happen during the President Bush's reign. Wow. His presidency is of course the Katrina catastrophe in 2003 or 4. Now I don't remember. Hurricane Katrina. I'm sorry, Hurricane Charlie hit my home, but Hurricane Katrina. Hit New Orleans and absolutely devastated the city. It also hit Biloxi, Mississippi, devastating these cities, flooding out these regions, especially disproportionately affected poor people, many of whom could not leave New Orleans because, of the timing of the hurricane. They just had no place to go, and they did not have money to get there. So we found lots and lots of people of color in New Orleans, disproportionately black, trapped in this situation, and very little response to their plight coming from the federal government until much later on, until the cameras looked down and saw the deplorable conditions that the people were living in, or even the people who were sheltered in the Superdome. This Katrina was a diplomatic disaster. So since then, of course, we've been looking for an equivalent to apply to Obama, President Obama, and we refer to those as Obama's Katrinas. Is this going to be Obama's Katrina? He really hasn't had an Obama's Katrina yet. He's still got some time left. Hopefully it doesn't happen. But either way, so this was a huge problem, and it kind of brought to the surface the fact that, well, wait a minute, there's still a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done with regard to poverty in the United States, especially with regard to poverty and how it overlaps with race and race issues. So we're still dealing with some of these race issues. Of course, also during this time period, we see relatively slow economic growth, although it does speed up toward the end of his presidency until the recession. And what are we seeing is that the gains that are being made in this economy are almost all going to the top 1% of the population. And it's gotten to the point now, economic inequality was growing under President Clinton, but now is becoming noticeable under the Bush administration. And of course, it will be in our face after the recession. So this growing economic inequality is going to become somewhat troubling for President Bush as well. But probably the defining closing of the Bush administration is going to take place in 2008. Of course, President Bush will win the 2004 election, and ultimately attempt to try to privatize Social Security, which is not going to work out very well for him. and will ultimately, because of that, probably lose the find that in 2006 the Congress is going to flip to a Democratic Congress as a result of the 2006 midterm elections. But what's going to end up happening is in 2008 we're going to have the worst recession since the Great Depression. Now, why did this happen? Well, we're going to talk about this more in the next video, but this is how we have ushered in the new millennium. So sorry my thing glitched and there's going to be 2 videos here, but it is what it is. Talk to you later, and we'll finish up with the last video coming soon, hopefully fairly soon.